Good evening, everybody. It is 6:31, and I'm going to call the Urban Design Commission meeting to order for October 11th. Can I have a roll call, please?
Monica Sullivan.
Here.
Jerry Winchester.
Here.
Nicole Ream.
Here.
Ed Leonetti.
Here.
Joel Miller.
Here.
Melissa Morse.
Here.
Steve Cohen.
Here.
Barbara Cash.
Here.
Jim Sawhill has been excused. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And I will just extend a friendly welcome to the two new commissioners, Mr. Cohen and Ms. Cash. Welcome, and I hope your first meeting is enjoyable. If you have any questions, just push the little button, and we can respond. Okay, so let's. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes? Thank you, Ms. Ream. Ms. Sullivan, would you like to speak to your motion? Anybody have any comments on the minutes? Seeing and hearing none, that passes. Disclosures, I'll just go down the line. Ms. Sullivan. Ms. Cash?
Yes, I will be abstaining from voting on the consent agenda because I was not seated as yet. Secondly, I did drive by the property just to become familiar with the area since I don't live on that side of town.
Okay.
Could you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Ms. Morse?
None.
Thank you. Ms. Ream?
No.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes, I'd also like to abstain from voting on the minutes and abstain from participating on the consent agenda. I was not yet seated on the commission.
Okay.
And I do have, I'm not sure when the appropriate time is regarding this case, but I want to just disclose that I live just a block away or 2 blocks away from the property, so.
Okay, now's a good time for that.
Okay.
So you live a little ways away from the property. Typically, the way that we do this is somebody makes a motion in the positive for you to participate, and if the commission feels that you cannot be biased or that you do have a conflict of interest, which typically is financial in nature with the case, then we vote against it. So can I get a motion, or does anybody have any questions for Mr. Cohen?
I have a question.
Go
So,
ahead.
if you live in the neighborhood and we've received a lot of public comment against this particular situation,
Yep.
do we need to ask if he has any vested interest in the case itself?
Sure.
On a base level, not a financial level?
Yeah,
The-
that'd be
Do
appropriate.
you have any, anyway, that's my question is, do you have any concerns with this case outside of financial? And can we even, okay.
Yeah, I think the question is, can you be fair and unbiased to the petitioner as a resident?
Yes, I believe I can, but I also, would want to defer to the chair and the commission. If there was any feeling that it would create some kind of bias in the process, I'd want to make sure not to
Okay,
create that kind of perception.
okay, great, thank you. Mr. Winchester?
Thank you. My concern is, how far away do you live?
So I live on 26th Avenue.
Okay.
Which is, on the basically a block and a half away. So I can't see the property from my house, but it's just around the corner.
And would you perceive that there would be financial interest in the value of your property based on the outcome of this action?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. Mr. Miller?
Yes, thank you. Were you aware of the Connex before this case came before you?
The only way I was aware of it was everyone in the neighborhood received some kind of a mailing on it. And I do believe the issue came up at the community council meeting, but I was not in attendance at that meeting.
So I guess the question would be, do you have any pre-existing opinions about the presence of the Connex?
I wouldn't say that I do, but I know some of the people who provided comments. So it does make me a little reluctant to want to participate in this particular decision.
Okay. Anything else, Mr. Miller?
No, I'm okay. I think he should recuse himself for this, just to make it clean.
Yep. So that process is to make a, thank you, Mr. Miller, for doing that, and Mr. Winchester for seconding. So you can speak to your motion, Mr. Miller?
Yes, I would like to direct Commissioner Cohen to participate in the variance, and I will not be supporting that motion.
Great, thank you. If we could all vote for Mr. Miller to participate. No, not Mr. Miller, Mr. Cohen, sorry, Mr. Cohen. Okay, great, thank you, everybody. It looks like you have been directed to not participate. So the process from here, then we'll go through a couple other things, and once the case is before us, then you will leave the room and... Okay, and if you would prefer, you could leave the meeting. There isn't anything after the meeting, so it's for your, if you want to come back, you're more than welcome to, but there's nothing else after this. Yeah.
And I'm unaware, is there a second case on the agenda tonight, or just the first?
Nope, there's just one case, right?
Okay. Got it.
Oh, the resolutions are on the consent agenda, and there's two cases for that,
I see.
two resolutions of
I
approval.
was a little confused about that. Okay.
Yeah, and they're not cases to be heard.
Okay, so it sounds like it'd be appropriate to just leave and then come back for the next meeting.
Yep.
Okay, great, thank you.
Great, thanks. Okay. So, Mr. Miller was next on the disclosures.
Yes, I was not present at the June commission meeting, so I won't be voting on case 2017-0069 or 0077.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. McLaughlin, looks like you have a question.
Yeah, before they remodeled the library, when someone was recused and they left the room, they were able to still listen to the audio in another room just from a learning experience.
Oh, yeah.
Mr. Cohen's a new commissioner.
It's a great suggestion.
Some commissioners, if it's the only case, they just head home because they're not allowed to participate in the rest of the meeting, essentially. I was just going to ask Lori or the chair, do we have a version of that now with the remodeling? We don't have it, do we?
She's shaking her head no.
So if Mr. Cohen wanted to stick around, he could take, I guess, a loose chair over there and set it in the hallway to still listen. No? Yeah?
Well, he cannot be in the room.
No, I know, but to set it outside the room.
Yeah, sure.
You could try and listen from there.
Yeah.
I know.
To at your discretion.
I raised that as a point, as a
Learning. Yep.
It's something we're going to have to figure out with the remodeling that's happened, how to deal with that. It's a change, and I didn't know the answer. I just wanted to bring it up. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Ms. Morse?
I would highly recommend maybe listening to the case afterward. They are posted online, and I did listen to a previous commission meeting before my first seat, so it might be a helpful learning curve for you since you can't participate.
Great, thank you. Back to disclosures, Mr. Winchester.
None.
Okay, great. Thank you. Oh, and disclosures for me, I have none. Now to the consent agenda. Can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda, please? Thank you, Mr. Winchester. Ms. Sullivan, do we have any, would you like to speak to your motion? Would you like to pull anything from the, nope. Okay. Hearing and seeing none, that motion passes. Thank you. Now on to our regular agenda and our public hearings. So I'm going to read the process here for the procedure by which the public may speak to the Urban Design Commission at its meetings. Public meetings are, after the staff presentation is completed on the public hearing items, the chair will ask for public testimony on the issue. Persons who wish to testify will follow the time limits established in the Urban Design Commission rules of procedures. A, petitions, including all his or her representatives, have 10 minutes, with rebuttal by the petitioner may be allowed when time has been reserved. B, representatives of groups, community councils, PTAs, etc. is 5 minutes. Individuals is 3 minutes. When your testimony is complete, you may be asked questions by the commission. You may only testify once on an issue unless questioned by the commission. An individual may have appeal rights related to any action the Urban Design Commission takes, except commission recommendations to the Assembly which are not appealable. Appeals must be filed with the clerk's office within 20 days after approval by the Urban Design Commission of the resolution, which is the commission's final decision. A fee for the approval is required at the time of filing. If we could have staff's presentation, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A point of information and process. There are 9 commissioners here, and it takes 5 positive votes to approve anything. So in order to approve the variance, there must be 5 people voting in the positive for the granting of the variance. Why is it that it's 5 and not 4 out of 7 people? Because the votes are not based on majority of people here. It's the code says that to pass a motion, it takes majority of the fully constituted board, which is 9. 5 of 9. 5 is the majority of 9, minus recusals. So we've had 1 recusal, but it takes 2 recusals in order to lower the 5 positive votes to pass it to 4, because then it goes down to 7. So it's just an important thing to be aware of.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, so my presentation. This is a request for a variance from Anchorage Municipal Code, Title 21, Chapter 5, Section 070D11 to allow a Connex unit on a lot, a residential lot with less than 40,000 square feet and not sided or roofed using materials and colors that are similar to the primary structure. Now, a point of clarification here, the Connex unit is painted the same color as the house, so it is a light color, but it's not roofed and sided, which is what the code language requires. Title 21, old code, did not address whether connexes were allowed on residential lots, and therefore connexes were allowed by a policy memo. There was no prohibition in the zoning code on connexes, and the building code allowed for a connex unit, and so therefore it was allowed, and it was written out in a policy memo available to the public. The new code, new Title 21, has changed this, and new code prohibits new connexes on lots with less than 40,000 square foot of area. Now, existing connexes are allowed to remain. Those are the ones that were allowed under old code, and they may remain. It's just new ones are not allowed. The applicant states that the policy memo that was available on the municipal website led him to believe that he was permitted to have a connex unit on his lot, which has 12,030 square feet. The policy memo was wrong. The policy memo had incorrect information. It was correct according to old code, but it hadn't been corrected or updated since the adoption of the new code. There were a number of comments for and against granting the variance included in your packet. There are several more that we received very recently and were laid on the table for you tonight. Also, I just point out one of them. This is sort of new information that we just learned today, that the Rogers Park Community Council at a meeting voted to rescind their previous letter. So the first letter that they sent, which opposed the granting of the variance, has been rescinded by the Community Council by this latest vote. Okay, so the department finds that so code requires that that all 8 approval criteria must be substantially met in order to grant the variance. The department finds that criteria 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 are not met, and therefore recommends denial of the variance. If after the public hearing, the commission finds that all 8 approval criteria are substantially met, then the department recommends that the approval be subject to conditions 1 through 6 on page 5 of your packet. The first condition of approval is a standard condition of approval. It's just simply that this approval is for what's depicted in your the as-built of the property, which was done for this application. The as-built is located on the next page, or on page 6 of your packet. So that's the standard condition. Condition number 2, prior to the variance becoming effective, you must record a notice of zoning action with a copy of this resolution. The variance, granting of a variance, means that it runs with the land for as long as that condition exists, the Connex unit in that location. And so the resolution that will follow the decision made tonight, that resolution gets recorded against the deed for the property so that it's in a recorded place and publicly available. So that's another standard condition of approval. It's always there. Condition 3, it says verify that the maximum lot coverage of 30% is met in accordance with the table of dimensional standards. I think that it's easily met. I did a back of the napkin calculation. I think that the lot coverage is not, it's not even close, but it still should be on a written document. Essentially a surveyor would put the lot coverage on the as-built to verify that the granting of the variance is not allowing for a lot coverage to exceed 30%. But again, I don't think it's an issue, but it's just a sort of dotting your I's and crossing your T's. Number 4, the Connex unit shall be moved to a conforming location outside of the side and rear setbacks. So there's a side setback of 5 feet, a rear setback of 10 feet, and talked with the property owner. He's confident that he can meet both the rear setback with no problem. There's plenty of room on the lot. Sometime during the process of the petitioner making application, this request, he asked staff if when we pointed out that there was an issue of the Connex being too close to the lot line, and he said, well, I'll move it so that remove that issue. And staff, I said that I recommended to him that he not move the Connex to meet the 5-foot required setback. Because I worried that, if the variance is denied, then he'd have to move it twice. And it just seemed adding fuel to the fire. It would make it worse for him and be cumbersome or difficult, costly. So it just seemed to me that the commission in its wisdom would recognize that moving it 5 foot from the setback would be a prerequisite for approval of the variance. That's number 4. Number 5, the Connex unit may only be used for storage accessory to a principal structure. That's just sort of stating the obvious. Code already requires this, that your shed on your house can't be for commercial use. Your Connex can't be for commercial use. It's supposed to be in support of the principal structure, which is and use, which is residential. And then 6 is obtain a building permit in accordance with the latest policy memo on having a Connex unit on your property. Because Connex units are both the existing ones prior to the new code are allowed to continue, and new Connexes are allowed on lots having 40,000 square feet of lot area or more. So there is a policy that still governs those allowed Connex units, and I've included that memo in your packet. After the staff report was published, then the applicant contacted staff and pointed out that there was an error in the staff report. The staff analysis states that the Connex unit is 9.5 feet tall, which is not accurate. There are some tall Connexes that are 9.5, but this is not one of them. This is the standard size. So the Connex unit is 8.5 feet tall. If there are any questions about this, I'd be happy to respond to them, but I just want to clarify or to correct the record that the Connex unit is 8.5 feet tall. The other thing that I say in the subsequent memo is that the policy letter that I provided in the staff packet, apparently there were several versions of the policy letter. say that the policy letter had been updated over time, and the policy letter that I provided to you and cited as this is what he relied on or whatever was not the right one. This subsequent memo includes the policy memo that he probably relied on. It was online at the time that he was making decisions about his property. So that's just to say that there are a bunch of policy memos, there's like 4 or 5 of them, and I've provided the latest one just for background, and I thought I'd picked the right one, but it was the one just before the correct one. But they say the same thing, so it's sort of a non-issue, but I definitely want to correct the record. Let's see. So I don't have any other comments on the variance. I'd be happy to answer questions, and the applicant is here as well. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I noticed you did not go through each point. Is that on purpose?
With only one case in the agenda, and I know that the commission reads their packets, they would have read all the standards and what's in the staff memo.
Okay.
Be happy to go through them individually. If I already spoke for quite a while, and I just thought that
Gotcha.
it might be good to sit back and. But if
We'll go through a round of questions here, and then perhaps you could quickly summarize if you don't go when. Thanks, Ms. Sullivan.
I'm just wondering, the photos here. It seems like it looks higher than the standard, but I can't figure out by scale. What's the size of the fence, the height of the fence of the neighbor? You don't know what's that height, or what's the height that it's permitted in the neighborhood for side fence?
There is no limit to the height of a fence in a side and rear yard. And I don't know the height of the fence. I did not go out and measure the heights of fences or the Connex.
I think there's a size, isn't it, limit for the fence? I used to live there, and I believe we couldn't build a fence.
I'm not finished. Ms. Sullivan, I'll skip right to answering your question. Fence heights, for the benefit of everybody, are limited to 4 feet in height in most residential districts in the front yard setback. So that's why you see them terrace up after the first 20 feet of somebody's property. You're required to obtain a building permit for a fence over 8 feet in height because it's then considered to be a structure, requires a building permit because of like wind loads or snow or something like that. But there are some fence height requirements, but the details of that. But basically, if you have questions about fences, I'm happy to talk with you offline about the fence of your concern. But for this, I don't know the height of the neighbor's fence. I'll leave it at that. I hope I answered your question, Ms. Sullivan.
Okay, thank you. I think that's important.
May I say?
Yeah, go ahead.
I didn't measure the height of the Connex or the fence. The property owner, the applicant, the petitioner here tonight has said that his Connex is 8.5 feet tall. I believe him. He's not lying about that. That's just the height of it's. I Googled it. I called the Connex companies and asked them. They said they don't sell the tall ones. They only rent them. I just don't think he's lying about this matter. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Ms. Sullivan?
No, I think I'm good.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Winchester.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the question I guess I had was regarding the policy that was in place, and I know there's 3 variations of it here, but that's fine. There appears to be a requirement for a $150 permit. Is that what, it seems like that was in place. Do you know if that was applied for when the container was actually set?
I don't believe that the
It says it wasn't required, the permit. It says it wasn't required, but there is a $150 permit per container. Is that something the Muni does?
I think there might be a caveat to that. The policy memo is pretty confusing. Okay, so let me flip to that.
So for everybody else's reference, it's...
So I'm looking at the, the subsequent memo and the metal shipping container, Connex containers memo on the backside of my memo. Okay, metal shipping containers, Connex.
Dated 07?
Yeah, the one dated 07.
Right.
Which is the supposedly corrected one, shows $150 per container.
Okay.
Oh, Ms. Morse has can chime in. Go ahead.
The policy dated December 3rd, 2007 has an exception to the permit cost. It says building permits are not required for the following. It's the paragraph after the bold word permits, and then it allows one container per lot. So that's where they get around the $150 building permit fee, is you're allowed one without a permit. You were allowed one without a permit.
Is that clear, Mr. Winchester?
Yeah, just, there's a bit of confusion because the land use requirements appear to also have a requirement for a permit. So, just assuming that there's confusion in this memo, it would be one to resolve at the municipality. Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. I had a question, Mr. McLaughlin. Do you know why the community council rescinded their vote, or their opinion?
I think, if I could just speak generally, I think that, very unfortunately, this is kind of a controversial issue in the neighborhood. There's some folks that are in favor of it and property rights, and then there are some folks that see this as a sort of a threat to the residential character of a neighborhood. It's just people have differing opinions, and this is kind of more, it's a black and white issue. Some are in favor and some are not, it seems like.
Okay, great, thanks. And then another question. This is fundamentally an issue on storage and how one stores their belongings on their property. In this case, it's a Connex. Is there a limit to the number of storage buildings in this zone, in this residential zone?
No, there's a maximum lot coverage of 30%. And
so if you had 30% coverage, you could have 14 little outbuildings as long as your 30% coverage is met.
You're correct.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other questions? Okay. I will open the public hearing now and ask for the petitioner to come forward. If you could state your name for the
Yeah, it's
record.
Aaron Glasser.
You spell it, please?
G-L-A-S-E-R. It's A-A-R-O-N, his first name.
Thank you.
I'm the owner of the property. I want to say thanks for your time, and thanks to Mr. McLaughlin. I had some, there's some issues with how this was written, and he brought up the issues, in a fair way, I thought. So I guess, just from the start, I just needed kind of a temporary storage thing for about 7 years or so. I'm trying to get funds to build an accessory building on my property. It's a large enough lot where I'm going to try to build a pretty large garage in the back, which would be perfectly fine to do within the building codes and the lot coverage. And so I needed something temporary to store some outdoor equipment, certain things I have, just for personal use. And so I went on the website. I didn't know the building codes for garages or sheds or any of these kind of things. So I went on the website, and on the policy page of the building codes, it says, policies are documents that the department, policies document the department's administrative procedures and requirements, and policies also clarify and interpret applications of the building codes. Compliance with policies is mandatory. So I said, okay, perfect. Looking there for that for sheds, and then I ran into this one with metal shipping containers, and then that's dated 12/03/07, and pulled it up, and it said that I'm allowed one per lot, as long as it's used for storage only, and that's the only thing I was going to use it for. So from there, and it was an exception. Did not building permits were not required, and it was kind of spelled out pretty clear there. And so I bought it. I had to pay, a substantial amount of money for it. I had to pay for a special kind of truck to deliver it, and had it involve taking down a fence and putting it in, then getting the fence installed. And I installed it, and that was September 21st of last year. The next month, October 21st, I got a certified letter from the city saying that I was out of compliance with the building codes. And I was, it's kind of dumbfounded, so I called them up and I said, hey, it says right on your website that I can have this. And they said, well, we don't really care about the policy letters. We go by the building codes. And I've never had to get a permit. I just bought this house 3 years ago. I've never had to do anything to it. I've never applied for a building permit. I've never had to go through that process. Never had anything go wrong. Never a hot water heater go bad. So from there, I had to explain to them, no, it says on your website. And that's kind of started this process that we're hopefully culminating tonight. If not, whatever goes further from this. But so from there, I had to, contact the city, and explain to them that you guys still have outdated policy letters. People are still buying these. They sell them in town that you can install them. This needs to be cleared. So a month later, it took them a month to fix this problem. Turns out this building code has been changed for 3 years at this point, or nearly 3 years, and that caused some frustration because they had ample time to just press delete. I mean, there's policy number 23, which is 5 away from that or 4 away from that one, has just been deleted. They could have deleted this. This doesn't need a big to do, and this is costing me money and time and so forth. So from there, the city ombudsman explained to me that they felt that they would lose a lawsuit, so they decided that you should get a variance instead of going in front of the magistrate. Because if we went in front of the magistrate, then it would most likely grandfather in all the connexes up until that point when they changed the policy letter. So I explained to them, at this point I don't want to pay for the variance fee. It's like $750, something like that. And so the city paid for this. So this is all on the city's dime. So city paid for this variance. It's not in any of this paperwork, but the city paid for this. And so from there, the city, the planning department staff explained to me that, hey, we don't normally side with the owner for a variance because it's their code. I understand that. It's their code. I'm trying to get a variance from their code. They think they're right. I think I'm right. And so I kind of understand where they're coming from. And they explained to me that, we think that we're going to approve, actually set for an approval. And then I got an email recently that said, we decided that we're not going to approve it. We're going to deny you for certain reasons. And I'm going to go into those real quickly because I'm kind of running out of time. I'd like to reserve 2 minutes. I'm sorry if there's.
Yep, noted.
Okay. That a lot of these findings that they have involve either it being too tall, 9.5 feet tall, that blocks my neighbor's view of the mountains, or the fact that it's too close to her property. And I explained to him in July, I will move that away from the property. And so I don't know why all those things are in here. That should have been taken care of. They should have noted that in here that, hey, this guy is more than willing to work with you, So I told them I'd move it that day, and they said no, just wait until the variance goes through. It's normal. Once the variance goes through, just put a caveat on there and move it. Well, that's one of the reasons they're trying to deny me of it. And then they talk about, a lot of times they talk about the fact that it's not faced with the appropriate stuff, appropriate siding. The problem with that is that even if it was faced, it would still be against the rules. I mean, if I had a 10 by 12 shed and I just took a crane, placed a Conex box inside of it, built a roof over it, you would have never known it was there, did it in the dark of night, it's still against the rules because of how the Conex rule was written. So, and I, again, was unaware of all these. So those kind of points, a lot of these points are moot points for denying myself. They've never said, you could cite it, because them saying that they don't want to deny me because it's not cited. If I would have cited it, it still doesn't matter. It's still a moot point. I mean, it's out of the code. So, and it is only 8.5 feet tall. If this thing has to go, I can just replace it with a 37-foot long, 4-foot wide shed that's 12 feet tall, right on the property line, and there's nothing against the code on that. It's under 150 square feet at that point. I talked to my neighbor that's directly next to me, and I asked her, what do you think about this Conex box being right there? And she said, I don't like it right there. And I said, okay, well, I plan on moving this. I'm dealing with someone in the city. They told me not to move it yet, but I plan on moving this. And so you might hear that it's an eyesore, and I understand this stuff. To me, it's a temporary structure. Unfortunately, with the variance process, it becomes a permanent structure that I can remove at any time. So to me, it's a temporary structure. My neighbor does not like it, and I understand that, and I'm willing to move it away from her property line. It's painted. I don't know how much more I can say about how that is. A couple of things. There's a lot of pictures that you guys might have. Now, those pictures were part of a packet that was from the Rogers Park Community Council, and all those pictures should have been rescinded too. There's only 4 pictures that probably should have been allowed.
So that's your time with 2 minutes of rebuttal.
Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Sullivan. Mr. Glasser, can you come back up? There's some questions here that Ms. Sullivan has and perhaps some other commissioners.
So I have a 2 questions.
Yeah.
You're saying you're going to build a garage in the back?
Yeah, eventually, yeah.
Okay,
plan.
and where are you going to access that garage from?
There's an alley. That's another thing. The way that the as-built shows, it shows that that Northern Lights is back there, but that's technically the Northern Lights easement. Is that the northern? And so there is an alley, but there's going to be some talk about, is this legally an alley or is it an access road or whatever, but there is an alley there that you can access the back of the property. And I'm the only guy on that road, myself and my neighbor are the only people, I think, on that road that do not have a rear garage. My neighbor has a garage in her backyard, but it does not face the alley. But everybody else has backyard garages besides my house.
Okay, so we'll have to figure out that. I'm trying to see. And then do you know what's your limits of construction from the back? From the back of your property line? You have a back property line. So do you have space to build?
Yeah, I can.
A garage?
Yeah, I can. I can probably build a 1,200 square foot garage back there. With the way the code is written, with how much of your lot can be used for parking and garage, those kind of things.
What's your setbacks in the back?
That's where the argument would be. It could either be 0 or 10. Either way, I would still have enough room to build a garage. Because of we're still unsure about the legality of that being alley. Some people have buildings right on the property line that have been permanent structures. Some people have some setbacks. It's an alley, but legally, that's a whole different kind of conversation.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
I just second everything that Aaron said about it's kind of a confusing thing. It looks and functions like an alley. It may technically be considered, Northern Lights, but I just want to say everything he said, and it's difficult to describe.
Okay, so that's why it wasn't surveyed, is because it's not an actually dedicated alley as a right-of-way? I mean...
No, hopefully I don't confuse things more. So the Northern Lights, dedicated right-of-way owned by the state is really wide. And technically this old neighborhood, their rear lots adjoin the Northern Lights right-of-way. But as we all know, the Northern Lights Boulevard is constructed quite a ways away. There's, a sidewalk on Northern Lights Boulevard, or maybe not in that section, but there's a wall, there's a
there is
separated
sidewalk.
trail, then there's at least a gravel, alley service access that people use for the rear of their homes. Most of those homes, or maybe all of them, have gates, and many have garages. It's
where garbage is picked up, sorry.
yeah. So
Yeah.
it's just a question of I need to ask someone to make a determination on what is the setback from that rear lot line in this neighborhood, because many of the garages are built to the property line. I believe that because there's a provision in code that says you can build to your rear property line when it's abutting an alley. So I think that's all jives fine. But there was just one of our coworkers that's kind of a stickler in the right-of-way division. It's really protective of roads. Of course, that's his discipline. And so he was saying, no, that's a state right-of-way. That's Northern Lights. That's not an alleyway. But he's speaking from a street maintenance perspective, and I think that the zoning code, there's so many confusing things, and the zoning code is not, this man's right-of-way, ownership thing. It's just like some people assume that their front yard is where their address is, but addressing has one set of regulations. Prevailing lot pattern, what is your front setback, rear setback, has a different set of regulations.
Right.
These are the rules that we live with, and it takes, people looking at these codes in order to explain what it is.
Yep. Okay. So, but what we do know is that it's 59.9 feet from the back property line to his structure, and that's what the survey says. Whatever the front yard or rear yard setback is taken off of that.
There's plenty of room.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. Nobody else has questions, it sounds like? Oh, they're back. Mr. Winchester.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I think on page 9 of the packet, it shows an aerial view of the lot that describes pretty well the distances from his back property line to Northern Lights. And of course, when Northern Lights was expanded, all those houses along Northern Lights were bought. And so that's why there's such a wide right-of-way there, and why now his back property line is on an alley instead of on, you know what I mean, those other properties are gone. So, and you can see that it has quite a nice alley going all the way down. So I think, in the end, the municipality is going to likely interpret this as an alley and allow him to build the property line rather than a back property line with a property owner behind him.
Yeah, agreed.
So I think that would be a normal interpretation of this particular unique property situation. My question is one of, has to do, sir, with when you put the Connex in there, were you aware that there were side yard setbacks?
That I was not aware of. And that was a fault of mine. I think my neighbor was out of town for a while.
Yeah.
And by the time I actually did talk to her, it was right actually around the same time when Mr. McLaughlin explained to me, hey, by the way, there is some rear setback requirements, and that was I'll own up to that was a mistake on my part, and and if I would have got a letter from the city saying your notice of violation, you're within the side setback, I would have moved it that day, just like I explained to him I would have moved it that day. And I think this would be a whole different, we wouldn't have a variance or anything for this.
Understood. So I have two other questions.
Yeah.
Next question is, we've had this term temporary bantered around, and so what do you consider temporary? And I'm going to ask the same question to Mr. McLaughlin.
Well, a temporary structure, there's a couple of things. There's a temporary structure, this would be considered a temporary structure, just because it's not on a foundation. It's can be easily moved. I can get you used to not have to get a building permit for it. I mean, you can get temporary structures that require building permits, sheds over 200 square feet, and those kind of things. So it's always going to be a temporary structure unless I, put it on a foundation, try to make it a dwelling or something like that. But this is a storage shed. For me personally, my goal is to only have it there temporarily, but that's essentially not what this variance is for. I mean, you know, that's not what the variance, how the variance has been written.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I would suggest that the word temporary has to do with time, not foundations. So maybe, Mr. McLaughlin, when we discuss temporary, what does the muni require? And I mean, is there a time limit? Where does that fit?
Yes. In Chapter 5, the last page in Chapter 5, it says general requirements for all temporary uses and structures. And there's 11 points or standards specified or requirements. And the third one says, unless otherwise stated in this title, temporary uses in residential districts shall last no longer than 90 days. So there are some temporary uses that you're allowed to do on your property for that short amount of time.
And I would submit that in the normal context of Connex's construction use and other variables in the municipality, that 90 days, maybe stretching with a couple of
That's
extra things.
Correct. That's more of a construction purpose instead of a storage purpose. And that's what's broken out in the exceptions. The exceptions are, you know, you can use it for storage, or you can have it temporarily for construction purposes, you know, or building purposes like that. That was not my goal. My goal is to have that used as a storage, temporary storage place in me personally temporarily, but as far as this is concerned, it would be a permanent structure.
Yeah, and I think that's the concern that I have in this whole discussion is you keep using the word temporary, but
Okay.
for us, temporary is 90 days, maybe extended to 6 months or a year, but it's not 7 years.
Yeah,
or
but you
8
wouldn't.
years
I wouldn't be
while
having a
someone
variance
puts.
for that, though. I mean, this whole thing wouldn't be happening in that case. So that's
Okay,
yeah.
so tell me what temporary, in other words, when do you think you would remove this Connex?
For the purposes of this, just say never. Then I mean,
Okay.
if that's you want to
Well,
get, you know,
I need to
yeah,
know that.
Yeah. Okay, we'll just say never. I mean, I don't. That's not what I want. But for this, never will be the
We
answer.
understand
Yeah,
intentions,
yeah.
but I'm
Yep.
looking
I'll-
for
never
something
will
that
be
this
the answer.
commission can
Yeah.
actually hang their hat on. And
Yep.
basically, you're saying this is not a temporary structure.
I completely understand. Yep.
This is
I agree with that.
basically
Yeah.
stay there until something.
Yep.
Okay. I think I had another question, but I can't remember what it was,
Okay.
but those are my two main ones. Thank you.
Yep, we can come back to you. Ms. Morse?
Thank you, Chair. For the effort to compromise, I'm curious as to your openness to add roofing, siding, or landscape screening or taller fencing.
Well, the taller fencing is kind of a funny issue because the way that the city's disagreement, or the city wants to deny me the variance, and the big part of their argument was the fact that it's 9.5 feet tall, and you can see it clearly from the side fence. I'm willing to build an 8-foot tall fence, and so that, you know, the neighbors can't see it. I mean, that's, you know, and I can maybe, you know, side half of it, build an 8-foot tall fence, and the other half, I don't know if that's what my neighbor would like if I built an 8-foot fence, because I'm legally allowed to do that. I don't think she would like that. I particularly don't find it necessary, but the siding and roofing comes into it kind of boils down to you know, kind of the crux of this thing. I wouldn't have put it there in the first place if I would have known I would have to now essentially build a shed around it and a shed on top of it. I would have just spent my, you know, $5,000, or, you know, or in this case it would be like siding and roofing it, you know, $8,000 on two smaller sheds that I could have built and you know, had built, and I'd be $8,000 into it and not have to waste any of this time. But we're here because of these errors that the city made.
So just to clarify, I'm looking for your willingness.
I
to
would
do
not.
this.
I would rather not do that because I would have rather have built. I would rather have built two sheds that I wouldn't have to deal with this.
I understand about what you would have rather done, but now where we're at,
Okay.
for negotiations, I want to know what we're willing to consider.
I would like a flat roof because it would, anytime we start getting taller than 8.5 feet, now we're starting to encroach on what, you know, my neighbor's biggest complaint was the view. I start putting a roof on it, it's now 12 feet tall, you know, and then it started, and then I'm already, now my neighbor's mad at me for another reason, and I don't want that, you know. I want to be a good neighbor in this situation, so. Siding, I'll put siding on it, I just don't want it to be any taller than it already is, so,
Thank you.
yeah.
Great, thank you. Ms. Cash.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Mr. Glazer, my question is, have you considered any alternate location on your lot for this unit?
Absolutely, that was, there's 1,000 other places to put it. I happened to put it there, and I was told by the city, don't move it.
Right.
Until we had this meeting.
Against the alley?
Oh, no.
Against
No, it would be.
else away from the neighbor?
It would be moved further, most likely moved much further away from the neighbor's property. It would either be 8 feet or 40 feet. It just kind of depends on how, it depends on the city discussing, is this illegally an alley or not? Do I have a zero setback or not? Those kind of things. But it would either be probably 8 feet or 40 feet away from my neighbor's property. I have no other neighbors besides my one neighbor.
So perhaps on the other side of
No,
your
well, not the
lot?
whole other side, just probably halfway through the property because this is all paved. This is not on grass or anything. This is on pavement, and so I have pavement. I have 40 feet of 40 by 40 foot of asphalt there, and because I wouldn't want to put this on like a lawn or anything like that, so it'd be 40 feet over. Either 40 feet or 8 feet away from the property line, which would be far out of the setbacks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Ream.
Thank you, Chair. So, I'm really confused that when the resolution
The resolution doesn't exist
was passed,
as far as
there
I'm
was
concerned.
a disparity of 29 in favor, 27 opposed, so it was definitely a hot topic.
Yeah,
And a month later,
yeah.
there were no opposed. Were you there to present or something? Do you have any insight? since
Oh, I
we
have
do-
plenty of insight on the second meeting. I have zero insight on the first meeting.
Okay.
Yeah. The Rogers Park Community Council, somebody wrote a resolution. It's kind of scathing, without any input from, hey, did you guys know that he was already going to have to move this thing, and he was willing to move it to begin with. It's kind of one-sided. It talks about I have a crowded lot, which I don't. And they talk about how we have small lots. I particularly don't have a small lot in my neighborhood. I have quite a larger lot for my neighborhood. It's actually twice the legal. R1 has a 6,000 square foot lot size. I have a 12,000 square foot, so I have double the size of a normal or the minimum R1 side. So it's not a crowded lot. Somehow, and again, this, as far as this Urban Design Commission is concerned, that first thing doesn't exist.
Okay, my question is not whether it exists.
Yeah.
It's we're trying to get down to the bottom of why there was.
I explained, I went to the community council meeting on Monday and explained to them, hey, this is what's going on, and somebody who, so the process in this place, I explained, hey, there was a resolution, it turns out, and I was unaware of it. So I kind of gave like a quick, this is what was going on, and would anybody want to have a revote? Or not revote, to readdress this issue. And for that to happen, somebody who had voted in the affirmative the first time, in this case to pass this resolution, had to volunteer, like, yes, I would like to readdress this issue. And then another person that voted in the affirmative had to second it, and then it went into discussion in the city, in our community council discussed it, and that was the vote outcome after it was discussed with input from myself.
And you provided a presentation to them of why you were doing what you were doing? And
I just explained to them pretty much exactly what I'm explaining to you guys.
Okay, I was just curious
Yeah.
if there was more insight into the.
No.
That's a huge shift for a community council to make that.
Yeah, well, to be fair, I mean, the first one was, I had no input on it. And, it was only, I'm not exactly sure who wrote the resolution, but it was kind of scathing. And they said some things that aren't particularly true in there. They said, like, if I get this variance, that means everybody in our neighborhood could get this, and that's not the case. If you thought it'd be a good idea right now to put a Conex box in your property, you're going to get fined $300 a day if you start getting into fines. There's a reason why it's been a year and I have not been fined $300 a day, because the city understands that they made a mistake. So there's a lot of talk in that resolution about grandfathering people in, and I explained to them, really the only way this stuff gets grandfathered in is if there's a lawsuit or if it was before January 1st, 2014.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, thanks. I have a couple of questions. Have you had conversations with your neighbor that has a Connex?
Yeah, it started when I got my letter in the mail. I called Ben Cogger, I think it's his name. Yeah, it's called Ben Cogger, the enforcement person. He said, "Hey, somebody said that you and a neighbor 4 houses down from you and another person, I don't know exactly where they live, got this, that they were turned in for having these Conex boxes." And so after I had the conversation with Ben, I walked down, or I got a hold of my neighbor and said, "Hey, what do you think about this letter?" And they had no idea at the time, and so I kind of explained, "Hey, this is what's going on." And so they're also in the same situation, under the same I guess, the same background. The one difference is that ours are slightly different sizes. Ours are not slightly different. Ours are different sizes, and so theirs falls under some slightly different rules, still against the rules. I mean, you still can't have it. Their argument might go a little different than mine, but they still, according to the new rules, couldn't have it. But that's pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're familiar with the, obviously you wrote your case packet, your response to the variance. There's a certain number of things that we have to come to a conclusion with it, and that we believe meets the intent of the variance that you're asking for. One of those questions comes to mind to me is if you have, when you drive down the quote-unquote not alley,
Yeah.
do you believe that your property and your Connex is in the same context with the rest of the neighborhood as you go from east to west?
Well, my house is. There's houses that are completely falling apart. 2 houses down from me, with a garage that's completely overgrown. It's completely derelict. And then there's all manner of different kinds of homes. This is Rogers Park. There's log cabins. There's new contemporary homes that don't fit in at all. If you just, like you mentioned, that if you just drive down the road, well, if you drive down that road, you're going to see a Baptist church.
Actually, the alley in particular.
The alley. You're going to run into a Baptist church that is literally a corrugated metal building. So from one end to the other, corrugated metal buildings. The city is full of corrugated metal buildings at this point. And it's in our neighborhood. They allowed this church to have a corrugated metal building in our neighborhood.
Okay, so I actually drove down it, and it was pretty intriguing the amount of garages, constructed garages that match the homes are right on the alley.
Yeah, it's my intent eventually to do the same thing. Yeah.
Okay. So that's one of the requirements to, is it in the same context of the neighborhood, and you believe that your current scenario is in the same context. It's not out of the ordinary of that context.
Yes, there is no real context to our neighborhood. I mean, there's all kinds of different buildings, and you can essentially build whatever you want. In any design, that you can build flat roofs, box buildings. You can do almost anything you want. There's no homeowner association that says what you can and can't build. It's only the building codes, and they're pretty liberal when it comes to these types of things. Mm-hmm. I mean, I could.
Okay.
Yeah, I could most likely build a house out of Conex boxes.
Yep. Okay. So. Very good. Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions? Nope. Hearing none. Okay. So you have 2 minutes for rebuttal.
Thank you.
Now we'll open up the public testimony to anybody that wants to testify. Come down and state your name for the record. Spell it for us. That would be great. Yeah.
Hi.
Hello. So you have about 3 minutes for.
Oh, that's fine. I don't have that much to say, but my name's Jonna, Johnnna. Last name's Cole, Kohl.
Great, thank you.
So I'm a terrible public speaker, too.
Welcome.
But my husband and I have lived in the neighborhood since '01, and I was actually, I've been in the backyard of the neighbor next to the Connex box, who's a friend of mine, who I actually said, this neighborhood's a great neighborhood, you should move here, I saw this great house. And it really does change the look of that backyard a lot. Rogers Park has been it's a long-standing neighborhood, so yes, there are a lot of different houses in there, but it's also a really nice neighborhood with nice property values. I think people kind of expect to move in and, have a certain level of people improving their homes is what I see in Rogers Park. So I don't want to see a bunch of metal Connex boxes in our neighborhood. I mean, that just really flat out looks terrible. This lot is really full of lots of things. I'm not sure that they really need a Connex box, and it's also not, it's against the city code, is my understanding. So I just wanted to say, as a neighbor who lives like one street over and a little bit down, I would absolutely oppose it. Yeah, thanks.
Very good, thank you. Anybody have any questions for Ms. Cole?
Sorry.
Nope, you're good.
Okay.
Thanks. Hello, sir, welcome. If you could state your name for the record, spell it, be great.
My name is Jim Richardson, Richardson. I don't want to take the time off of my testimony, but I am the Vice President of the Rogers Park Community Council, and if you have any questions, I could probably answer them.
Mr. Richardson, are you speaking on behalf of the Community Council or as a
I
resident?
am not. I'm an individual.
Okay, thank you.
I do have one other question. These are my photos. I included 2 of them with my letter. Can I give those to you to pass around?
Yeah. We'll just start them down with Miss Sullivan and pass them down.
I just have a question. Did you went to the community council meeting, the last one?
I was not there Monday night, but I wrote the resolution, and I'm the Vice President.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Sullivan, if we could wait for his testimony, and then we can ask some questions. Thanks.
Okay.
Go ahead, Mr. Richardson.
Thank you. I'm a 25-year resident in Rogers Park. It's been a great place to raise my family. I'm very involved in the community. I've worked with the Assembly, our legislators. I'm on the Rogers Park Community Council. This is an issue of great importance to me in the community. Our community, like a lot of communities, is sort of under attack from a lot of different things. We have a lot of issues going on right now. We have crime. We have 2 drug houses in the neighborhood. We have 1 abandoned house. We have 1 junk house, 1 junkyard. But I think we're heading towards another junkyard. But that's my opinion. But I'm speaking in opposition to this variance. As you can see on the photos there, it's just a monstrosity. It overwhelms anything to do with a house next door. From my perspective, it's exacerbated because it's right on the property, well, it's beyond the property line, but there's no place on the property that I believe that this would be appropriate. There's a reason that the city put in the code, and we can talk about that, but we've got a lot of different things going on, and in this case, sometimes we have the city kicking and screaming, and we have to bring things to their attention. In this case, the city recognized a problem. They developed the administrative code, and all we're asking is that you apply this and require this to be removed. And I'd like to point out that this property has been there for a long time. The previous owner lived there for a long time. Mr. Glazer is a recent resident. There was no problem at all in the neighborhood before he moved there. He didn't talk to his next door neighbor before he moved this in. He just put it in there, and take a look. It's ridiculous. It's out of context with anything in the neighborhood. And Rogers Park had covenants when it was first built. It was one of the original ones, but they didn't pass through. But I agree wholeheartedly with the letter in your group, in your packet submitted by Cheryl Worrell. She lives next door. I hope that you read that, and she's got some photos associated with that looking next door. My letter speaks to the negative visual impacts as well as crowding effects, and I think this would affect, I'm 2 blocks away, or about 2.5 blocks away, but this would be a detriment to me because it affects my neighborhood and the visual attractiveness of my neighborhood, but it would also affect my property values. I can't imagine when you get a chance to talk with Ms. Worrell, how would she sell her house right now? That's ridiculous. I included in my letter to you that there are other reasons why, people like Connexes because they're cheap, but they're not great. They rust. They tend to go look there. They don't have a safety catch on them. People die in Connexes every year. They're sometimes used for carry toxic stuff. Whoops. That's my time.
For 3 minutes, if anybody has any questions, perhaps he could continue his discussion. Do you want to submit this for the record, or are they just for us to?
It's for the record.
Okay.
I took those photos, and I included two of them with my letter.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Okay.
Ms. Sullivan has a question for you, sir.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yep.
Well, I think he answered. I'm sorry, I thought he was done before. But I just wanted to know if you went to the council meeting. It just seems like first there were a lot of openings, and now it's like the council meeting went on and there's no one. So I'm thinking not a lot of people attended the council meeting. But
I could give you my impression of what's going on.
go for it.
Just try to
Please.
keep it clean and
Okay.
above board here.
Yeah, I wasn't at the meeting last night, and I talked to people that were there. My answer is that I wasn't at the meeting. I have a president that I disagree with, and I put the original motion together, and it was on a normal meeting. We had a very strange meeting. We've got a crime committee, and everybody in the neighborhood is really whipped up about crime. Our usual council meetings are, we have trouble getting a quorum, and our quorum's 15. A big meeting is 25 people, and we had almost 90 people at the meeting when I got the resolution, and people voted that weren't even in the neighborhood. So it was a close vote. I thought the vote would be like 20-1 or something like that in favor of the resolution. But the president she has an opinion on this, and she was violating Roger's Rules of Order and operating a meeting and making me madder than hell. And I was so mad that I didn't go to the meeting, and I wasn't testifying. I was told that the applicant, Mr. Glasser, made representations that I believe were not correct. And you could talk to somebody, you'll probably get a chance to talk to somebody that was at the meeting. I probably shouldn't tell you, represent what I think was said and wasn't said because I wasn't there. But it's not a clear-cut issue, but I think it was steered, I guess.
Great.
So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Nope. Hearing none. Thank you, sir, for coming, testifying. Come on down. If you could state your name for the record, spell it, please.
Jocelyn Fenton, Jocelyn, F as in Foxtrot, ENTON.
Great, thank you. And you're here as a resident?
Yes.
Okay, you have 3 minutes.
Let's see, I think I live 3 doors down from Mr. Glaser. I have to agree. I'm actually a permitter in a prior role, and I found it very difficult to find the regulations, like what was discussed with Mr. Laughlin, the policy memo, the shed parameters for up to 200 square feet of a shed type structure, and the land use requirement allowance. I purchased a 20-foot brand new Connex to put on my property in place of a decrepit shed. And whenever we hear the neighbors saying, oh, well, let's see what this looks like, you should have seen the shed on my lot. I did stakeholder engagement. I talked to my neighbors. I said, listen, I'm going to replace this with something new. It's the color of my house. And they were elated. You should see my current neighbor, their house is falling down. He mentioned their garage has trees growing out like in the driveway. You can't get into it. It's falling down. It looks terrible. So, keep that in mind whenever you're talking about context. There can be some pretty bad structures, and, a Connex can be really nice looking compared. They're sturdy and secure, especially during these times where every morning I wonder what's been stolen from my property. They've got cedar wood floors. They're really nice. They're easily transportable. They're sellable. They're very clean. I haven't had any squirrels in it. I happen to have it under a temporary building use permit. We plan on building a garage. Our designer was late in their designs, and so we're keeping it longer than your temporary definition that we talked about earlier. But another thing to note is that the code and the policy changed within days of Mr. Glasser's petition. And so the city recognized that there was an issue, and they have been trying to correct that. And so others that are worried that this is going to set a precedent, need not worry. And like he said, if he's willing to side it, I agree. Why put a roof on it and make it taller when it doesn't need a roof? And setting it back to where the neighbor, it doesn't encroach in that 5-foot setback, I think could ease a lot of the issues. He has a very large lot, and there's a chance that the neighbor couldn't even see it, and she could go on to enjoy her residency. And with that, he has a right to enjoy his property as well. The owner's enjoyment of their property is something to look at in addition. So I think that's everything I have.
Great, thank you. Ms. Sullivan has a question.
So I have a question for you. The Connex exceeds the area of a shed, right? Of what it's allowable.
Mr. Glacier's.
The Connex. It's bigger than a 10 by 10 structure in the back to keep your tools.
I think you can have more than a 10 by 10. I think you can have up to 200 square feet without having a building permit.
That's correct.
And how much square footage it's the Connex, do we know?
Are you asking, which Connex are you asking about? Ms.
His
Fenton?
Connex.
It's up close to 400, I think.
400. So
320.
320.
320. So my question to you is, do you think the size doesn't matter to the neighbor?
Well, considering that he would be able to build a shed in a configuration of 320 square feet with a building permit, that would be allowable. I mean, he's allowed to build a 1,200 square foot shop. Do you think she'll like that whenever that blocks the view? I mean, that will be bigger and taller.
Okay, well, thank you. I'm just like one of the persons that move away from Rogers Park because that issues. And it is a concern for a lot of people.
Right. Well, and like I said, I bought a 20-foot Connex because I thought it fell under that. It was under the 200 square foot shed, parameters for needing a building permit, and I didn't think I would need a building permit. It's only 160 square feet, so yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. Mr. Winchester.
Thank you very much. Question similar, but a little bit different, is when you installed your 20-foot Connex, you said you did get a permit for temporary?
I did not
Did
at
not.
the time. That's correct.
Okay, just checking. And secondly, did you install it with the 10-foot setbacks?
No, I didn't. I put it right in the place of where the shed sat, and so
And the shed is how far from property line?
it was on the property
It
line.
was on the property line.
Yeah.
So it was right on property line.
So
Okay, so you weren't necessarily conforming with that either. Okay, I just.
that's correct. And I mean, and you don't need a setback on a shed?
Not on a shed, no.
Not at something under 150 square feet.
So,
Right. Understood.
yeah,
Just-
the thing that we did wrong is that we talked about buying a Connex for 30 years instead of, not waiting so long. We've been at the property since 2007, and we talked for years about getting a Connex, and we waited too long until after, what was it, January 2014 or something like that?
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Nope. Thank you, Ms. Fenton.
Thank you.
Hello, sir. Welcome. State your name for the record. Spell it, please.
Tony Fisher, last name Fischer, first name Tony. And I'd like to speak for the variance for Mr. Glasser. I did help him install the Connex. But I'd like to state a few things that I believe Mr. Glasser would be agreeable to comply with any conditions of the variance. He did put this in at a considerable cost. And contrary to Mr. Richardson, I don't think Mr. Glasser's Connex is the root of all evil here. It's just a Connex. It's just a storage facility. And I do believe it'll be of a temporary nature with his intent to build that garage. I do live in College Village, which is the neighborhood across the street from Mr. Glasser. So that's about all I had to say.
Okay, great. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Fisher? Nope. Thank you, sir. Come on down, state your name for the record. Spell it. It's like a broken record saying that, huh?
Steve Nelson, Nelson. I'm a resident of Rogers Park. I've lived there since 1975 on the north side of Northern Lights Boulevard. During that time, I've seen the neighborhood change. We have increased traffic, increased crime, increased homeless issues. I've had 2 incidents where homeless people have camped in my garage, and now we're adding this Connex issue. As you know now, there are at least 2 in the neighborhood, and I can see the potential for others, which I do not agree should be there, that these would impact the quality of our neighborhood. For your information, I was at that community council meeting on Monday where that letter was rescinded. It was my understanding and recollection that they were to send you a letter saying why they did that. But I do remember one specific aspect, is that there were factual errors in that letter, specifically the dimensions of the Connex, as pointed out by the owner, and that was one factor in rescinding that letter. There are probably others that you should have gotten some information on. That's all.
Okay, great. Thank you. Do we have any questions for Mr. Nelson? Nope. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Ms. Morse. Sorry, Mr. Nelson. We have Ms. Morse would like to ask you a question. Sorry, I missed it.
Thank you, Steve. If you could recall any other details, I will tell you that the information that the commission received was not very detailed as to why they rescinded that, and that is causing some of the confusion on this commission on the board.
And I'm not an officer within the community council, just a resident, and I would think that maybe Jim can push that issue for you guys. Okay?
Okay, just for your reference, the packets that are in the lobby should have that letter, the rescinded letter from the community council.
Thank you.
Yep. Hello, sir.
My name is Thomas Crowley, Crowley. I'm a 25-year resident of Rogers Park. As you may know, it's a highly desirable neighborhood, and there are, in fact, some houses that are fallen into disrepair. But over the time I've lived there, the trend is for people to improve their properties. And I think that trying to upgrade some decrepit shed with a 40-foot shipping van is a bad precedent to state. I'd hate to think what our neighborhood would look like littered with 40-foot shipping containers. So I would very much oppose the variance.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Crowley. Does anybody have any questions? Nope. I'd like to take a, sorry, sir, we'd like to take a 5-minute break if we could. So it's 7:50, so it's 7:55. Come back. Thank you.
We knew it. We knew it was. How are you so excited? Yeah. I'm happy to come.
How are you?
Yeah. How's it going in here? I'm just catching bits and pieces. Pretty heated, huh? Are you surprised? I don't care.
I send my piece.
It is a way to read this point properly. Wow, that's Well, congratulations about
Hey, what else would you say?
I know. I like these like false equivalencies. Like, you know, there's crime in our neighborhood. Can't help this. What the fuck is that?
I did bring that up. It's not the root of all evil. It's just the comments.
This is why I'm so pissed off about it. I shouldn't have a visual celebrations. Hi, I'm Paul Wright.
Oh, yeah.
Now I know who not
Oh, very nice.
You know, I didn't
Yeah, I can see that too. Oh, yeah. Got a great family. Okay, I will.
Thanks, Pete.
Yeah, you too. Hey, Aaron.
Yeah, you keep it cool. Yeah, I mean, relatively pleasant, I would say. I didn't.
Ren, I know. I don't want to belabor. I'm just going to go back to my seat.
She's like, get over here, you little hippie. Look at that little hippie.
Well, good luck.
Hey, thanks for coming. I'll see you back. We're having the honey. We got to bring the kids over to see the honey beehives. The Oh, this is Tyler's little guy.
Oh,
See,
okay.
these guys rented.
Yeah,
these guys rented the apartment house. And they just moved out in August. We are having another little one today. Well, we found out it was a boy, so it was March 26th.
Oh, how exciting.
Sarah was a little bummed about the no girl.
I get it. We were we were surprised and ecstatic when we had a couple of this.
Garth is of 3 boys, and, you know. Good luck.
If we could all take our seats again, that would be great. Thank you. Almost there. Welcome back, everybody. So I'll open up the public hearing again, and if you have some, come on down. State your name for the record.
My name is Paul Reich, R-E-I-C-H. I've been a resident since '76 over in Rogers Park. We raised our family there. It's a good family neighborhood. I don't think these connexes should be allowed. Fire, I think there's a setback rule. It'd be kind of hard for the fire department to move them. I was at the Rogers Park Community Council meeting, and I'm not good at this. I'm a plumber, but
you're doing great.
My understanding that this thing was going to be temporary, Mr. Winchester, and temporary was between 2 and 5 years. Now I hear 7 years, and We can't have those things in the neighborhood. They're just, it doesn't blend. And something else, that's it.
Great, thank you. Anybody have any questions? Nope. Okay. Hello. State your name for the record.
Tyler Britton, Britton.
Thank you. Go ahead.
So a couple things that I think are kind of thematic here. One is the issue. Some of the pictures. I think I can't. What's your name? Last name? Richardson provided. That's where the Connex is now. So clearly you can see it from the neighbor's yard. But if that Connex is moved 40 feet in away from the fence, there's no way you're going to be able to see that from the neighbor's house. And in fact, the only place you will be able to see the Connex at that point is from the non-alleyway at this point. So I think that needs to be taken into account when we're considering where you're going to be able to see this. It's not like this is being put on the front lawn with big purple neon lights. So the only place you'll be able to see it is from the non-alleyway, and there are much bigger quote-unquote eyesores elsewhere on the alleyway. And the second thing I'll say is, as far as the original assembly conclusion being rescinded on the meeting on Monday night, not having Mr. Glasser there on the first vote is sort of like having a court case without the defendant or their lawyer present. So again, I'm not sure why they were voting originally on Mr. Glasser's case when he wasn't even present or wasn't informed. But I think that when you actually have the person there to explain the situation, you might see a few opinions shift on the matter. To give a little more information about myself, I no longer live in the Rogers Park neighborhood, but I did live there for 2.5 years until this summer. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any questions? Nope. Thank you for coming out tonight. Anybody else? Hello. State your name for the record and spell it, please.
My name's Cheryl Worrell. I'm the most effective neighbor that lives adjacent to Aaron.
Great. Could you spell your last name, please?
Well, my first name's spelled Sharryl, and my last name's Worrell, Worrell.
Great, thank you.
And I did submit this, which you may have seen. I only sent it in on Monday, I believe. I don't want to completely restate my letter, but I also did include some photos of the backyard and the storage that is being accumulated there. Just real quickly, I don't want to take up my time talking about that Rogers Park Community Council, but the issue was actually on the agenda last month when the vote was taken. I wasn't there Monday. I didn't even know. I think it got brought up as new business, so that a lot of us didn't even know that it was going to be discussed again this week. Let's see, real quickly, I live at 1850 East 27th, and I'm the homeowner, like I said, most adversely affected by this industrial Connex box. But I wanted to thank you for your time tonight. I oppose this variance being approved, as I outlined in the letter. And for me, it's been an eyesore for over a year. I'm tired of it, and this hearing couldn't come soon enough. I feel like there's a lot of blame going on here, but I think that the bottom of this is that my neighbor took action that was poorly researched. If I have only quickly looked at the websites, they did seem somewhat confusing. However, these policy letters clearly state at the beginning that you still have to reference AMC code 21 and 23. And so if I was going to invest 4 to 5 G's in a industrial Connex box, I would pick up the phone, I would call the code enforcement folks or the planning department or whoever is the subject matter expert on these things, and do my homework before I invest this kind of money. So I feel it was poorly researched. It is illegal. It's against the law. It's actually on my property. The fence is almost 2 feet inside my property line. So not only did my neighbor not get a as-built to find out, hey, where's the property line, or do the homework, is there a setback? But there was zero communication. I am in the Air National Guard, and I did have to leave for military training for about 4 months. However, I was leaving the week this thing was going in, so I came back to like see this monstrosity in my yard, and I've been putting up with it. This individual already has a 4-car garage with an attached indoor workshop. There's, I think, 4 boats being stored back there, 2 30-foot recreational vehicles, the Connex box, multiple sheds, and it's an eyesore. This isn't the Rogers Park neighborhood that I planned on spending the rest of my life in.
Okay, thank you. That was your time for 3 minutes, that buzzer. Does anybody have any questions for Ms. Worrell? Ms. Sullivan.
Can you please finish what you were saying?
Well, yeah, real quickly, I just summarized in my letter that these are the reasons why, and I was speaking mostly to subsection D, delta, in the number of areas that a person must get approved by you. And so D is how it adversely impacts, the neighboring. And I don't believe it belongs in the Rogers Park neighborhood. It doesn't belong. And this code has been in effect since 2014. This individual did not live there. This Connex box was not in place. It's incongruent with the residential nature of the neighborhood. A lot of people don't even have a garage. This house already has 4-car garages. So if you have that much stuff, rent a storage unit, you rent a boat yard, park your things at an RV lot. It has blocked I used to have a great view and a beautiful view of the Chugach Mountains. The fence is lower. I believe it is about 6 feet. So to me, this towers above. I'm not going to get into what I haven't got out there with the tape measure. I'm very busy, single mom. But I thought it was about 3 feet above my fence. It's decreased my enjoyment of the yard. I have a lot of perennial beds in the backyard, and greatly diminished the overall ownership of my home. I would not have purchased this home had that been there. And I've even mentioned to my friend, I don't even want to live there. I hate pulling in. I've deployed to Afghanistan. I've lived in a Connex box. Really, I have to actually live next to one. I spend a lot of time in the backyard with my children and trying to improve my property, and that is what I would have hoped my neighbors would also do. Again, I understand. I knew he was willing to move the box, but that's not the point of the matter. I just kind of wonder what else is going on and how can a residential home need so much storage. But so I asked that it be moved prior to freeze up. I'd like to move my fence also prior to freeze up. So I hope that this is taken seriously and then we can put an end to this. Also, well, I was disappointed to hear that now there could potentially be a 1,200, because then that would make a 6-car garage.
Yeah, the allowable area for code, for a garage is a lot more. You can have more space, and so but the matter that's before us here tonight is if we prefer to allow a Connex and an R1, which is not allowed by code.
Correct.
A gentleman can store his whatever he wants to store, however he prefers to store it.
Yeah.
So do we have any more questions for Ms. Worrell?
No, thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you for coming out tonight. Hello, sir. If you state your name for the record and spell it, please.
My name's Paul, P-A-U-L. Worrell's my last name, W-O-R-R-E-L-L, same as the last young lady who was here. I'd like to speak against the variance being granted. I don't live in Rogers Park, but I do have B3 property on East 76th Avenue, and guess what? In B3 property, connexes are not allowed. At least the last time I read the rules, that's what they said. I have no idea if the rules have changed. But about 15 years ago, my neighbor, who has 4 or 5 lots, not just one, he started moving connexes in for temporary storage. And first he had 2, and then he had 4, and then he had 6. and then he had 8. And then he moved a couple right up against my building, well, 4 to 6 inches away, which they were ugly like the rest of them, but we had an extra problem in the spring because if we get a really hot day in the spring, then water would pour off the connexes, pour in, through my walls into the building. We wouldn't just have a flood, we'd just have a river in there. But it doesn't happen every year. It's only if we have a really hot day in the spring. So I tried to get him to move the connexes initially, just how about move them 4 feet away from the wall. But anyway, nothing happened, and I went and talked to him in person, and then I began 10 years ago or so trying to complain to the city about, hey, you know, this is a lot of connexes, and he's not allowed any, so how about if some of these get moved? Well, pretty much every year I would complain, and then nothing would happen, and then fall would come, and they'd say, well, we can't do anything because freeze-up's coming, but in the spring we'll take care of this. But of course, in the spring, nothing happened, and so then we went on with the cycle. I did count the connexes the other day. There were 16 now. But wonderfully, he did move 3 of them this spring. So that's wonderful, including the one that did the worst flooding. There's one more. But these things are ugly. Temporary storage has a way of becoming 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. I think it affects how often do I paint my building on the exterior? How much? One of my other daughters is after me to remodel the exterior. How much money do you want to spend on a property? Do you want to repave it? Do you want to paint the stripes? All the factors go into your decision making of making your building look nice, which helps make the city look nice too. So I really do approve of your zoning, and I think it's constructive for the city as a whole. Because different groups of people have to make different decisions. But all in all, I think if you do make rules, you really do need to enforce them. That's all.
Great, thank you. Somebody have any questions for Mr. Worrell? Nope, thank you, sir. Anybody else like to speak tonight? Don't see anybody coming down, so you have 2 minutes for rebuttal.
Yeah, appreciate people's comments, and I understand a lot of things were brought up. There was like a causality correlation thing about crime in our neighborhood, and now this. The reason why I have this is because somebody literally unbolted my fence and broke in the back of my yard and stole a bunch of stuff. I mean, this is happening on a daily basis in our neighborhood. So as far as eyesores, there's a lot of eyesores. There's homeless people everywhere on Northern Lights Boulevard, and this is I'm just trying to get some of this stuff taken care of. There's like you said, I am allowed to put stuff in. There's no derelict vehicles in my property. Everything's licensed. Everything's registered. Everything runs. There's nothing. There's nothing any derelict nature in my property. When it was brought to my attention that it was, that it was encroaching on the property line, I immediately said I was going to move it, and I actually talked to my neighbor, about it, and I understand I completely understand where she's coming from. So I guess this issue boils down to: is the city going to grant this variance, or is the city going to pay me for it and remove it? And it's, this is, be later down the road, as far as any lawsuits or anything is concerned. That's why the city paid for this. That's why the city wanted me to come down here and do this. I didn't want to do this. I didn't want to have to stand in front of everybody and just kind of air my business out like this. It seemed kind of unnecessary. And as far as the policy letter is concerned, it does say that these policies, compliance with the policies, are mandatory, and so it's not like you should kind of keep reading into this stuff. The policies are there to clarify, interpret the codes so they're easily read, and then you can follow them. It is mandatory to follow these, and it was, and up until November 21st, it was mandatory that you can have one. Thanks.
Great, that was 2 minutes. Thank you. You have any questions for the petitioner? Ms. Cash, sir?
Sorry, no.
I do have one question, and that is, I am new to this. This is my first meeting, and I am
Mine too.
unfamiliar with the city, requesting that a petitioner petition for a variance, and because they're afraid they might get sued or would lose a lawsuit. So, can you shed some insight? And I mean,
Yeah,
somebody
I'm
tell
not
you this
sure
over the
how-
phone.
I'm not sure how often the city pays for variances to be done. I don't know if you guys, if it's 5% of the
To
time?
this point, never.
Okay, so this is this is a strange circumstance, and I don't want to be in the circumstance. I never wanted to be here. I was upset. It's frustrating to me that I'm dealing with this, and so that's why and that is why the city did what they did. And unfortunately, it was the ombudsman said over the phone that there was fear of them losing a lawsuit and being grandfathered in. Obviously, that's something you don't email out if you're the city.
So this was the ombudsman, and it was
Yes.
telephonically.
Yes.
So I think for our purposes tonight, we have a case before us that is asking for a variance.
yeah.
And our job is to either vote in favor or against it. And either way,
Yeah, you shouldn't be
either
worrying
way,
about
we need to
that.
state
Yeah.
findings of facts.
Yes.
Because if we do grant it, somebody can appeal it on the same grounds that you can appeal it if we don't grant it. So regardless of which way we end up voting tonight, a lawsuit could still happen.
Yeah, I wouldn't want you
Kind
guys
of a
to
moot point.
I wouldn't want you guys to vote in favor of it for the city's sake, or to save them from anything. That's
Yeah, our
that's,
task.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's not the task here.
Right. Okay, thank you. Anything else, Ms. Cash?
No, nothing.
Okay, great. Mr. Winchester.
Yes, sir.
So just briefly, you do understand that there are these requirements we have to meet, and 5 of these say you have not met those by virtue of the way that Mr. McLaughlin has interpreted, and that in order for us to grant a variance, we have to find that he's wrong on 5 things, and we have to state how he's wrong. So this is not a small barrier.
I
to deal with.
agree with that, and in particularly these. One of them that was not brought up was the fact that it goes against the Anchorage 2020 policy, and that's a policy that's not the law of, and so it seems kind of odd that we're in here because of a policy letter, and he's quoting the Anchorage policy of what they would like things to be, and that is not how things are, and that's one that was actually left off. Besides that, they talk about affecting my neighbor because it was so close to property line, and because the elevation was 9.5 feet tall, those things could be remedied. The fact that it doesn't conform to the standard, again, could be remedied, and does not, and like Ms. Moore said, what can we do here? I mean, are you willing to side the house? I'm willing at this point to kind of get this issue behind me. So yes, and these are the things that are brought up in those 5 elements are things that if they were remedied, they all can be remedied, but they don't exactly. They would still technically be illegal. They'd still technically be against the code. If using the excuse, I shouldn't be able to have this because it's not cited, if it was cited, it would still be against the code. Using it that if it's too close to the property line, well, if I moved it away from the property line, it'd still be against the code. So the way that those 5 things are laid out are essentially moot points. They don't actually, they wouldn't fix the problem. You can't, I'm not trying to get a variance for I'm not trying to get a variance for a structure close to my neighbor's property line, which is one of the things that are brought up. That should have no effect on this.
Well, the matter of fact is that you're here tonight.
Yeah.
Because you have a Connex on your parcel.
Yes, sir.
And it's in a residential district, and it's not allowed. These 5-6 factors are what are deemed by staff, the municipality, and then confirmed by us as either in compliance or not. That's the rules we're playing by.
Yes, sir.
So they are valid and they are merited. And in order for this to pass or fail, it has to be stated. So If you have questions that pertain to each question that you would like to ask, I think now would be an appropriate time, but I think that it's a waste of time to discuss why those are there.
No, and that was basically where I was going to go
Please go.
next.
Yes.
Was, under a Municipal Code 2103, 24OG, approval criteria,
Yeah.
which is the legal law that this organization here has to follow.
Yeah.
Number 1 says the proposed alternative achieves the intent of the subject design standard to the same or better degree than the subject standard. And it says this is not met. And the reason it's not met, and there's a long paragraph here. And the problem, I'm just saying, how do we...
Sir, I completely agree with you because I was told by the city to, you need to do the way we'll do this is for you to do a variance application. And so I had to sit down and try to, this is a much better case for a magistrate. And that's I go to the judge, magistrate, I plead my case, the city pleads their case, and they make a decision with no criteria. So this is not the right forum for this situation. This is the forum the city picked. They wanted me to come down here. I had to go through all the same criteria.
Okay.
Yeah.
In all due respect, we are not here to debate if you should be here or not. We have
No,
a case before us that we need to
I
decide on
understand
tonight.
this, but your questions are involving these criteria, and I'm saying, exactly.
All I'm
you know.
suggesting to you that is you don't have any, all I'm trying to get an answer, and I'm sorry,
Yeah.
maybe I've obscured my question. You don't really have any specific elements of your proposal that says you're going to meet these 5 criteria. Is that correct? In other words, you can talk around it and say, but the point is, these are criteria that we have to meet. We're looking for somebody to say, here's how I meet this criteria, even though Mr. McLaughlin said you didn't, and we need to be able to say, we kind of agree with you. You do meet that criteria, or not.
I can tell you right now that I can make that thing look exactly like a shed, and it would meet every criteria that can be, except for the fact that in the heart of it is a Conex box. So there's nothing illegal about building. I have to get a building permit. If you grant me this variance, I have to get a building permit to have a 320 square foot shed. So there's nothing in the law. The only thing, the crux of the law is that if I built a 320 square foot shed that adhered to every single law, but I had placed inside of it a shipping container, now it is against the law. So it's the fact that there's a metal building in place, and this could be a 10-foot metal building inside one that I would not even need you wouldn't even need a building permit for, or any kind of permit for a 10-foot by 8-foot Conex box, inside a shed. It would still be illegal, but yet all the design characteristics of the neighborhood, all the size, all the setbacks, all that stuff would be there, except for there's a metal building. And at what point, what the legal definition of a shipping container starts drifting once things are modified to it. So this is a very tricky situation, and that's where we're at, essentially.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. McLaughlin?
Thank you for calling on me, Mr. Chair. I just, to try and get back on track with the tenor of Mr. Winchester's comments, the decision is based on whether findings can be met, that these approval criteria are met. Mr. Glasser has provided a lengthy narrative in writing with his application explaining why he thinks each of the standards is met. So for standard number 1, the one that Commissioner Winchester referred to, Mr. Glazer says the design standard for this case is for intermodal shipping containers to blend in to the rear of the lot. In this case, his Connex is in the backyard bordering one neighbor and painted to match the house. His lot is 12,000 square feet, twice the minimum size for the R1 lot, has plenty of room for the Connex, and does not get close to the lot coverage requirement. So Mr. Glazer has made the case, tried to make a fact-based case to give the commission findings on why each of these standards of approval is met. The planning department has written, has a department recommendation based on its review of those same standards. But just for the benefit of the discussion, we do have a written findings made, or a narrative by the applicant. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. Ms. Morse?
Thank you, Chair. I did want to commend the applicant for cleaning up. And one of the points we haven't talked about is junk properties. We haven't talked about that clearly enough. Storing your items does lead to less crime in neighborhoods. The municipality currently in their budget is allowing $200,000 for code enforcement officers to help clean up junk properties. So I do commend you in your effort there. I am finding myself stuck on the beginning of the policy AG 19 that you provided to us that requires you comply with AMC's Titles 21 and 23. That's something that the person or the company that sold you your Connex should have been aware of. And I feel bad for you as a homeowner. However, the due diligence to put this on your lot wasn't completed.
I agree. I agree that there was some.
Excuse me. So, was there a question that you asked?
There was not.
Okay. Thank you.
Sorry.
Pause for a minute. Thank you. Go ahead.
I got all off track now. Thanks, Ed.
Sorry.
I actually would like to hear your rebuttal.
Yeah. I guess the only problem with that is that as the reason why we have these policy letters in place is that as just a layperson who's not in the city planning, these things clarify these issues, and so and it's pretty strict that you have to comply with these policy letters, and so when it says this clarifies code this and this to allow you to interpret it better. That is the city's way of letting you know that you are allowed to do this or you're not allowed to do this. I mean, imagine if it was kind of, if this was reversed and they had a policy letter saying that you could not have one, and I put one on there, and then they said, and then it turns out that the code had changed and I could have one. I mean, that would be just a simple wash. The city would be able to wash their hands with that because they could say, oh yeah, you can have this. That was our bad. Well, in my case, it's $5,000 later. You can't have this. Still my bad. I'm not going to get fired. No big deal, but you're out $5,000 or, and that's where this due diligence comes in. The city had 3 years to fix this. And if we're going to talk about due diligence, the city has, the complete onus on their due diligence on this.
Thank you. I will continue. In addition to the policy asking you to refer to the code and purchasing this structure from a company that should have known better, there is an additional section that requires you, it's 2101-060, that requires you to use the most restrictive code. And I get people don't read code for fun, and we're mostly building professionals up here, so we do have to know it a bit more than the layperson, but there's resources, and obviously you've met Francis.
I can speak to that too. And I know this.
Just one second.
Yeah, sorry. You're talking about resources, and so
yeah, and obviously you found that now, and I understand that that's a mistake. I will admit that I think not fixing that policy 19 was the Muni's mistake, and I also see multiple mistakes from your side. So it's our job up here to figure out whose fault, who lies with the fixing of it, being that there's faults on both sides.
I have a little bit to add to that. It's, one of the reason why the policy letter changed was not, according to Francis, was not me notifying the enforcement. It was Francis overhearing somebody in building safety saying that they were allowed to have it over the phone, and then Francis stepping in and saying, just a random walking down a hallway overhears somebody saying they can have this, and that's when this happened. The city has been telling people up until this time frame that they could do this, and so it's not just the due diligence on the policy letter, the city needs to own this problem. And if it means the city just, buying it from me and taking off my property, I'm fine with that too. I'm not in love with this, not my granddad.
So that's not before us tonight. Before us
Yeah.
tonight is a variance.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that is even in part of the discussion.
No,
Do you
no,
have,
no.
Do you have other questions or
I'm
comments?
done, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I don't see that there's any other questions here. Mr. McLaughlin, I am interested in you briefly in like 2 or 3 sentences summarizing each of the 6 factors after what you've heard tonight, and kind of do a quick recap of how it is not in compliance.
In regards to standard number 1, a Connex unit on such a small residential lot cannot be made compatible with the neighborhood. The dimensions of the Connex, 40 feet by 8 feet by 8.5 foot tall, it does not seem compatible with a residential neighborhood or with lots less than 40,000 square feet where it's more easily hidden. For standard number 1. I go on to say in that standard that the Connex unit is not screened in accordance with the requirements of code, and that there's already storage space made available on the lot through the garage and through the sheds. And it seems extraordinary and unnecessary for storage needs for a single-family home. Standard number 2, the department has found is not met. Anchorage 2020, which is the comprehensive plan adopted by ordinance by the Municipal Assembly in 2001. Policies 5 and 7, rezones and variants shall be compatible in scale with adjacent land uses and consistent with the goals and policies of Anchorage 2020, and that talks about harmony of neighborhoods and character of neighborhoods. Policy 7, avoid incompatible uses adjoining one another. The department finds that on such a small lot, Connex is incompatible. Standard number 3, the proposed alternative results in benefits to the community that are equivalent or better to compliance with the standard. That's a tough one to meet. Obviously, the proposed Connex does not result in benefits to the community equivalent to or better than compliance with the subject standard, which is to not have a Connex on a lot less than 40,000 square feet. While wood sheds are common in residential neighborhoods, Connexes are not. This Connex unit is placed on a lot of 12,000 square feet and is detrimental to residential character of Robert Rogers Park neighborhood. The Connex is visible from Northern Lights Boulevard in both directions. Standard number 4, the department's finding is the proposed Connex unit adversely affects the use of adjacent property to the west. Backyards afford opportunities for leisure, enjoyment, sunlight, playing, and gardening. And this Connex appears to be a detriment to the use of the backyard of the neighboring lot. The variance, okay, so standard number 5, the department finds is not met. The requested variance changes the character of the zoning district where the property is located, does not meet the intent of the code. The code prohibits Connexes on lots less than 40,000 square feet. Standard number 7, skipping to that one, the department finds is not met. The owner is seeking to keep an existing Connex to securely store household items. The Connex unit has significant adverse impacts on the adjacent residential lot to the west. There's a loss of sunlight, enjoyment of their home. Further, they are experiencing a loss of customary use of their residence given the size and location of the Connex, which is immediately adjacent to the property line. Now, I will say that Mr. Glazer has correctly pointed out that staff recommended for him not to move the Connex away from the lot line until after this hearing. Any approval of this variance would be prefaced on he would have to move it out of the setback. 150 square foot, you may have 2 greenhouses or sheds of 12 foot high, 150 square foot in size, and not on a permanent foundation within your side and rear setbacks. So that's something that would be allowed on the property line in this location. But because this is one item that is 320 or 340 square feet, wherever it is, it's not, it has to be moved outside of the 5-foot setback, and that's just something that he's offered to do.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Glasser.
Thanks, sir.
Somebody else have any questions? Okay, so the case rests with the commission. What do we, as a commission, want to do? Oh, I'm sorry, I have to close the public hearing. Now the public hearing is closed. Now, what, as a commission, what would we like to do? The case before us is case number 2017-0103, design variance from AMC 2105-070D11 to allow us Connex to remain as is on the property in the R1 Single Family Residential District. So, as you're thinking about making a motion now, whoever makes the motion, it's imperative that when you make it, each one of these 6 or 7 topics as outlined in the case packet is stated, and findings are included with the statement. We could always talk about it a little bit more. If anybody has questions. Mr. Winchester, thank you for a motion to approve. Do we have a second? Thank you, Mr. Miller. Mr. Winchester, would you like to state your motion?
Yes, motion to approve variance AMC 2105-070D.11, which is Rogers Park subdivision, to allow an intermodal shipping container on a lot with less than 40,000 square feet, not sided and roofed, using materials and colors are similar to primary residence.
Thank you. And are you including the department recommendations in that motion? Subject to those?
Sorry,
Subject
yes.
to those?
And I am including the department recommendations.
Great.
1 through 6.
Thank you. I'd like to speak to your motion now.
Mr. Chair, I find that I will not be supporting the motion. This is kind of a tough precedent to set. This commission, with the number of standards that are not met by this particular variance, though we certainly understand the consequences and circumstances that might have brought this situation to where it is, this commission is not in a position to make decisions on municipal code necessarily. We are able to make decisions relating to variances and subjective areas. This is not one of those. And so I will not be supporting the motion.
Great. Thank you. Mr. Miller, would you like to speak to your second?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I will not be supporting this motion either. To me, this is a fairly straightforward matter of an outdated policy letter, which does not trump code. Title 21 is pretty clear on this, and having read the approval criteria from 21.03.240G, I concur with staff's findings, and I also read Mr. Glasser's comments to those approval criteria, but I think that that the staff findings are more accurate, so I won't be supporting the motion.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion? Anybody have any comments or questions? Or seeing none, Mr. Winchester, would you please go through each one of the 7 findings, and I believe we need to read. Hold on a minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for this opportunity. Yes, in the case of AMC 210507-0D.11, allowing an intermodal shipping container on a lot less than 40,000 square feet. This is a proposal was to request for a variance of a 320 square foot intermodal shipping container, Connex, on a lot less than 40,000 square feet, not sided, roofed, using materials and colors similar to the primary structure. In the findings by section 21.03.240G, approval criteria, criteria number 1, the proposed alternative achieves the intent of the subject design standard to meet to the same or better degree than the subject standard. We believe that basically believe the standard is not met. The proposed Connex does not achieve the intent of the design standard, and the new code prohibits Connexes in residential lots of less than 40,000 square feet on lots prior to January 1, 2014, and this Connex unit was additional storage and external is an extraordinary and unnecessary to meet the standards of storage needs for a single-family home. Criteria number 2, the proposed alternative achieves the goals and policies of the comprehensive plan to the same or better degree than the subject standard. I don't believe that the standards are met. Proposed 40-foot by 8-foot high, 8.5-foot corrected tall Connex does not achieve the goals and policies of the comprehensive plan. I'll bet the comprehensive plan, which was adopted in 2001, Anchorage 2020, policy number 5, states rezones and variances shall be compatible in scale with adjacent land uses, and we don't find that to be the case in this particular variance. Policy 7, avoid incompatible uses adjoining one another. Again, we don't feel that it meets policy 7. Standard number 3, the proposed alternative results in the benefits to the community that are equivalent or better than the compliance with the subject standard. We believe the standard is not met. This Connex unit does not result in benefits to the community or the neighbors and is not in compliance with the subject standard. As noted by staff, the woodsheds are commonly in the residential neighborhoods and Connexes are not, and I think we find this all to be true. Standard number 4, the variance, if granted, will not adversely affect the use of adjacent property as permitted under this code. The standard is not met. This proposed Connex unit adversely affects the use of adjacent property owners, and I think that the fact that it is 3 foot higher than the existing fence or approximately next door, it does affect that neighboring area, and the fact that it is 40 foot long. It's not 10 foot or 15 foot like a 10 by 15 foot shed would be. It's 40 foot long, which is a very major piece of that particular view. Standard number 5, the variance, if granted, does not change the character of zoning district where the property is located, is in keeping with the intent of the code, and does not permit a use not otherwise permitted in the district in which the property lies. I believe the standard is not met. It does change the character of the zoning district. I mean, Rogers Park is a very old and very standard neighborhood, and it's going to change that to have that type of a storage facility in that area. Standard number 6 doesn't apply. It's ADA. Standard number 7, the variance, if granted, does not adversely affect health, safety, and welfare of the people of the municipality. Standard is not met. It does change and adversely affect the adjacent property owner, as evidenced by both photographs and testimony tonight. And the size and the location of it adjacent to property line. Standard number 8, in evaluating request for variance, for the maximum sign height does not apply. I won't read that particular whole standard. So, Mr. Chair, I think we're being asked to look at something here that really is pretty well written in the code and pretty well standard of our community at large. That we would like to see these types of facilities not brought into R1 districts, and to set a precedent of a variance here, I think would be seriously a problem. So, again, I'm not going to support the motion.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Winchester. Anybody else have any other findings that they heard during the case? Ms. Morse.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to add that although the property owner was acting within their understanding of written muni policies, speaking of AG 19 that was published on 12/3/2007, that specific policy also refers back to the Title 21 and Title 23 that would have been the current code. In addition, 2101-060 addresses conflicting provisions, and that also clarifies that the more restrictive code is to be followed.
Great, thank you. I will add one thing that for finding number 1, that the Connex was placed on the lot September 21st, 2016, which is approximately 2 years after the new code was written. Another comment here too, there was public testimony. There was about 8 or so, and it seemed to be split. There were some in favor and there were some opposed. I thank everybody for coming out. That's all I have. So if nobody else has any other comments, Mr. Winchester, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to clarify. There were actually 7 opposed and 3 for in the testimony tonight, and I kept track.
Great, thank you.
10
total.
Yeah,
thank you.
10 total testimony.
Okay, thank you. So with that, we'll call a vote. Okay, it looks like that motion does not pass. So thank you everybody for coming out. And the next item on the agenda is reports. Mr. McLaughlin, at our last meeting, we were chatting with Ms. Ferguson about a architectural review board, committee, subcommittee. So if you could touch base with her and perhaps update us. I don't anticipate that you know a response to that.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Leonetti, Mr. Chair. No, I was unaware that the commission had asked staff or the department for any follow-up information. Basically, I can go speak with Ms. Ferguson tomorrow morning and our manager, Dave Whitfield, and compose an email to you tomorrow.
I don't think there's a big rush, just perhaps the next meeting.
Oh,
would
okay.
Be fine.
So what was the question, though?
There was an idea to do a subcommittee of local architects that could review proposals prior to going through the entire process. And Ms. Ferguson was going to look into it and get back to us.
I think that the department would oppose such an architectural review body because it would be viewed as duplicative. So each of these boards and commissions of the municipality is, in code and appointed.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them, sunset and have to be allowed by the assembly, such as the Urban Design Commission, and they're not even made permanent. But within code, there are options for minor modification and alternative equivalency compliance. There are attempts in the code to create flexibility from the standards, the design standards in Chapter 7, to allow the architecture of a building or of course, there's the variance process, but I think that the feeling among the department is to be supportive of creative solutions to site design and to the architecture of buildings. And if it doesn't comply with code, but it achieves the intent of the code or design standard to an equal degree or better, then the department wants to encourage and support that. And so I think the way that would work is if someone has a multifamily residential project that is subject to all these residential design standards in Chapter 7, and they have a hard time meeting one of those standards and propose something different, or if they just have envision a different type of building that doesn't strictly comply with one of the menu choices in a standard, then they should present that idea in a conceptual way to staff or to the department to get a feeling on whether or not the department would support such a thing in bringing it to the commission or approving it at the administrative level if that's an option. That's the way I think the department would probably prefer to handle it. I pay pretty close attention to the residential design standards, the code, and some of these discussions that are happening in the community. And although I'm a member of the department, I don't know what the department would say. I can't speak for the department in this matter without checking with my boss first. But I think that that would be probably what my supervisor, my manager would say, is that we'd rather see people try and use what's already in code rather than try and invent a new layer or something different. It's been a little used section of code, and maybe that's because people are not aware of it yet, or maybe they are fearful that doing something creative or something that doesn't meet a design standard menu choice would be penalized, and that's not how I see the department handling that option.
So I have just fast comments. There's a lot of cities that have this type of group that helps advise the department. I am not sure of how many designers you have in the department, and I think when it comes to design, it's very difficult to judge what's right or not, if it's enough articulation or not. It's kind of a very difficult topic. What about I give you, before you go and just tell them, I'll give you a list of bullet points of why it will help you guys have some advisory committee that you can just get some help from. Because, we haven't had the case that someone goes by the alternative design. But I think it will happen pretty soon with the issues that we're having downtown. And I think we'll test probably what happens. So I think there's a few projects going on downtown, and I don't know if you guys are aware. I'm involved with 2 of them. And there's a lot of issues with when it comes to the standards and the bulk requirements. Like if we're doing a mixed use, for example, mixed use, the bulk requirements are kind of set for commercial buildings, for office buildings, not for residential. Residential has a total different shape. We're trying to create density. We have a lot of restrictions with the lots downtown, so density is quiet, not being very easy to achieve with the code. And I think the 2 projects that are out there right now are going to set a tune of what we should do. I just think that we need to find different rules for downtown.
Yep.
And I will present bullet points to you, and maybe you can talk to the department with something. Maybe I can investigate a little of how it works in other cities.
Yeah, I think that would be good. I think Mr. Miller has something to chime in, and then Mr. McLaughlin is also on the radar here. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I don't think I was at the meeting where you guys discussed this. Maybe I was, and also not being an architect. But it seems to me like if I'm not quite understand what would this be like a working committee? Because it seems to me like if you're pre-reviewing plans, then you introduce bias before they come before the commission.
You know, let me investigate how it's done in other cities. I know it exists in many cities, and it's very helpful. Let me investigate how exactly works, how they integrate into the department, and I will write bullets of why it could be good for Anchorage. Would that work? And then you can present. Because I think we need kind of like something in writing.
That would be helpful for me. Mr. McLaughlin?
So, I think the strongest argument in favor of creating a new way of reviewing deviations from the design standards that are in the adopted code is for projects to come forward that use these options for alternative design, equivalency, compliance, or minor modifications. So what I'm saying is if a project comes forward and is not supported by the department, then it would seem like your best and strongest evidence for the need to have architects provide guidance to the department. To have architects, design group provide guidance to the department wouldn't change anything about our current state because no projects have actually been proposed to use this. It's sort of, I have an urban design background from planning, but I'm not an architect. There are other design professionals like Tom Davis in the department. He was hired as an urban designer, but I don't believe he worked in an architecture firm in Tokyo. But I don't know. He may be the only person with an architecture background in the department. So say that the department is completely devoid of any design background. Your argument to provide that through design professionals in the community doesn't help unless you can point to a project that you propose to have a creative design alternative, and then us silly people with no knowledge of these things deny it. The Urban Design Commission is here to make these decisions, right? I mean, that's why you all are here. So I offer that. And then separately, Ms. Sullivan, downtown is still in the old code, the B2A, B2B, and B2C district. The B2A, B2B, B2C districts are into the old code and are not in the new code. So there's no residential design standards, new code residential design standards applicable, and alternative design compliance, those aren't options. So your point is well taken that the downtown districts should be adopted. And I can speak more to that, but it's a whole.
Yeah, no, what I'm bringing the downtown, I think the downtown projects are going to start setting up. Like, we're going to see a lot of what's going to happen. Maybe we're going to come to you with a project and it's going to be like not accepted for a reason that doesn't has enough articulation. We'll see what happens, but.
I think this started when there was a petitioner in front of us that's Ms. Ream. I'm sorry. Go ahead. She's going to smack me if I don't.
We're tired.
Hold on.
That's exactly what happened. We had was it Cook Inlet Housing come before us, and what was happening is we've got all of this new construction that started out looking so fantastic. There was articulation, there was color, there was change, it wasn't your standard C111. We actually had some creativity. The issue comes to the fact that there's a formula. And if they go with that, and for some of these housing for like the Cook Inlet housing, for instance, their whole agenda is to make sure that they house people, a lot of low income. And so, it costs money to do these designs and to come before the UDC only to be rejected and have to go another 3 months before they can be heard again. And so the idea was to allow for creativity. They need to know that they're not going to get rejected after they've invested a certain amount of money in here. So it actually came from a petitioner saying, we'd love to be creative, because I believe it may have been Monica that mentioned that things were starting to look the same. And it's because we're going to continue to see things looking the same. They know exactly what they can do to make it get through the UDC without any issue, because as long as they meet code, we're okay with it. But we're not okay with it. You know, and it's weird because it's code, so we should be okay with it. And it's coming out, we're getting cookie cutter. And how do we fix that? And I think she's right, and I would support an email to the planning department that has ideas of how this is accepted in other cities and adopted, and maybe we need to look into doing this to get it through the Anchorage Assembly.
I would agree, and that is remarkable that you spoke first. Good job. And two, that you're an engineer speaking up for an architect, which is awesome. So if you could summarize,
I will.
in a bullet little email, that would be good. And then if you could kind of chew on it and send it to Sharon or whoever else that you need to chat with, and then have someone come back next meeting, or perhaps it's not urgent, so just that'd be good.
I think that proposing new menu choices within the standards. So there's a standard about, wall modulation. There's a standard about, roof design. There's a standard about entryway features. There are each one of these sort of like standards. And if members of the community or members of the commission wanted to suggest new menu choices to add to those, because you have like A through E or A through, whatever F of choices, if those are in adopted code, if you think that one of those residential design standards would benefit from having another menu choice, I think that proposing new menu choices to those standards and new creative options, that would be warmly received by the department and evaluated, and it could potentially become code, adopted code. I think that what you're proposing is, maybe like, well, let's do away with the residential design standards and get an architectural committee to
No.
No.
Like,
That's not the path.
you're
No.
having a pre-application meeting early in the process before they even come here. So you could use this group of architects and designers to evaluate the project and then give you feedback. And then you can go ahead and tell early in the process the designers, your building is very articulated, we believe all, it's just kind of like a way of being more, how could I say it? Barb, help me here.
We're having a hard time promoting alternative design submittals because they don't have the opportunity to preemptively talk with someone beforehand to make sure that it's not completely
bonkers.
Right.
Sure they do.
Well, we were told that they aren't doing it because there isn't a method to do that.
So designers or projects are required to have a pre-application meeting before they make application. And we
That's
have
after they've
concept
already
meetings all the
gone
time.
through and hired an architect and done the design.
Right, that's after. So
Tyler Robinson has pitched ideas for me. Well, we would like to do this, and it doesn't comply with that. And I've been super forthcoming with support and encouragement for that. And I said at most of the pre-app meetings, I still don't see it. If Ms. Sullivan's project proposes something that's not cookie cutter, I'd love to see it and I'd love to support it. There's no pushback here against it. Just do it. And
So maybe the menu, I will do the two things, the letter, and then also I think I will work with some architects that I know that they are very into design, that maybe we can, I would shoot an email to them and see if they can add ideas for a new menu that will make the design a little more flexible.
Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be great.
I mean, that's another good idea. I think if there's flexibility, then that's good. Even people that has come and submit projects from another state, they have said this is the most difficult
Code.
design standards to understand, to deal with, and where, I mean, I don't remember where was that presenter from, Los Angeles, some big city, and it was like, this is unbelievable.
I think it was a sign one.
Yeah.
But regardless.
But anyway, everyone is tired, and the meeting was very long.
Looking for a motion to adjourn.
I have one.
Lori has something. Oh,
I have
yeah.
a couple of things. First of all, there is not a November meeting nor any cases. The other thing is the 3 reappointments of Joe, Monica, and Jerry were on last night's assembly for introduction. They should be on the October 26th agenda for confirmation. And you guys are fully constituted right now.
There you go. There's when they kicked me out.
All right. So maybe we'll see everybody in December.
No.
Maybe.
You're going for another year.
Thanks. I'm not.
What are you doing?
Did we get a motion? Did somebody? Who did? Morris Ream. Thank you.